The sun hung low in the sky over the quiet town of Maplewood, casting long shadows across Main Street. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, or at least it started that way. People were going about their usual routines, shopping for groceries, chatting on park benches, and walking dogs along the tree-lined sidewalks. Dr. Emily Carter, known to everyone as Doc, was finishing up her rounds at the local veterinary clinic. She had just finished treating a calico cat with a sprained paw when she noticed something strange outside. The sky above the town seemed darker than it should be, almost like storm clouds were gathering. But there was no wind, no rain, nothing to suggest bad weather. Instead, a deep hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Doc stepped out of the clinic, squinting upward. At first, she thought it might be a plane flying too low. But then she saw them. 3 enormous ships descending from the heavens. They glowed faintly, their metallic surfaces shimmering like liquid silver. The townsfolk froze where they stood, staring in awe and fear as the ships hovered silently before touching down near the edge of town. No one knew what to do. Some people ran inside to hide, while others gathered cautiously in the streets, trying to make sense of what was happening. Mayor Bill Harper hurried out of City Hall, his face pale but determined. He tried to calm the crowd, raising his hands and speaking loudly. "Stay calm, everyone. Let's see what they want." Beside him, Sheriff Joe Dixon adjusted his hat nervously, gripping his flashlight like it could somehow protect them against whatever these visitors might be. From the largest ship, a ramp extended downward, and figures emerged. They were tall, much taller than any human, with sleek bodies covered in smooth armor that reflected the sunlight. Their faces, if you could call them that, were hidden behind masks that glowed faintly blue. Each movement they made was precise, deliberate, as if every step had been rehearsed countless times. They carried no visible weapons, yet their presence alone was enough to silence the murmurs rippling through the crowd. One of the aliens stepped forward, its glowing mask tilting slightly as if scanning the humans before it. Then came a voice, not from its mouth, but seemingly from everywhere at once. A device around its neck translated its words into English, though the tone was cold and mechanical. "We seek your leaders," it said. "Identify yourselves." Mayor Harper swallowed hard but managed to speak. "I'm the mayor of this town," he announced, raising his hand hesitantly. "And this is our sheriff." He gestured toward Joe, who nodded stiffly. The alien turned its head slowly, studying them both. Its gaze lingered on the mayor for a moment before shifting to the sheriff. Satisfied, or perhaps simply unimpressed, it addressed them directly. "You will provide us with information about your world. Failure to comply will result in consequences." As the mayor and sheriff exchanged uneasy glances, Doc watched quietly from the sidelines. She wasn't sure why, but something about the scene felt off. These beings clearly believed they understood how humans operated, judging by the way they immediately sought out titles and ranks. But life in Maplewood wasn't so simple. Leadership here wasn't always about badges or offices. Sometimes it was about trust, kindness, and knowing when to step up. Her thoughts were interrupted when chaos erupted nearby. One of the smaller ships accidentally struck a stray dog during its landing, sending it yelping in pain. The crowd gasped, and several people rushed forward to help. Doc didn't hesitate. Grabbing her medical bag, she knelt beside the injured animal, gently examining its leg. Her touch was steady, her voice soft as she whispered reassurances. Within moments, the dog stopped whimpering, its wide eyes fixed on her face. What none of the humans realized was that the aliens were watching closely. Their advanced technology allowed them to detect patterns of authority, analyzing vocal tones, gestures, and reactions. And right now, all signs pointed to Doc. While the mayor stammered and the sheriff fidgeted, she exuded calm confidence, earning immediate trust from those around her. For the first time since arriving, the aliens found themselves questioning their assumptions about human society, and wondering if perhaps they still had much to learn. The aliens stood motionless, their glowing masks fixed on Doc as she tended to the injured dog. The crowd around her had grown quiet, watching in awe as she worked. Her hands moved with practiced ease, wrapping the dog's leg in a makeshift bandage while murmuring soothing words. To the townspeople, it was just another example of Doc being herself, kind, capable, and always ready to help. But to the aliens, it was something far more intriguing. Their scanners buzzed softly, analyzing every detail of the scene. They had been programmed to identify leaders based on clear signs of authority, titles, uniforms, or displays of dominance. Yet here was a human who commanded respect without any of those things. She wore no badge, gave no orders, and held no official position. And yet, when she spoke, people listened. When she acted, they followed. It was a puzzle the aliens couldn't ignore. One of the taller aliens stepped forward, its metallic footsteps echoing against the pavement. Human designated Doc, it said, its voice cold and mechanical through the translator device. You exhibit qualities we do not comprehend. Explain your rank. Doc looked up, startled. She blinked at the towering figure, then glanced at the crowd before answering. I don't have a rank, she replied simply. I'm just a vet. I take care of animals. Her response seemed to confuse the alien even more. Its head tilted slightly, as if processing her words. You possess influence over others, it stated. Yet you claim no title. This contradicts our data. Before Doc could respond, Sheriff Joe Dixon stepped forward nervously. She's telling the truth, he said quickly. Doc doesn't boss anyone around. She just helps people. That's all. The alien turned its glowing mask toward the sheriff, studying him briefly before returning its attention to Doc. For several moments, it didn't speak, as if debating what to do next. Then, without warning, it raised one clawed hand and pointed directly at her. You will accompany us aboard our vessel for further analysis. Refusal will result in harm to your settlement. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Doc froze, her heart pounding. She wanted to argue, to refuse, but the look in the alien's eyes, or rather, the faint glow behind its mask, left no room for negotiation. Slowly, she stood, brushing dirt from her jeans. All right, she said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. But leave these people alone. They've done nothing wrong. The alien made no promises, but it gestured for her to follow. As Doc walked past the mayor and sheriff, they exchanged worried glances but didn't stop her. The townsfolk parted silently, their faces filled with dread and hope. Some reached out to touch her arm or offer quiet words of encouragement. Others simply stared, praying she'd return safely. Once aboard the alien ship, Doc found herself surrounded by strange technology. The walls shimmered like liquid metal, and soft hums filled the air. She was led to a large chamber where several aliens waited, their masks glowing brighter as she entered. One of them approached her, holding a device that emitted a low whirring sound. Without warning, it scanned her body, projecting images into the air. Doc watched in amazement as holograms of her brain, heart, and even her memories appeared before her. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "We are assessing your capabilities," the alien replied. "Your species' methods of leadership defy logic. We must understand." Over the next few hours, the aliens subjected Doc to a series of tests. They replayed snippets of her life, moments when she comforted a grieving pet owner, calmed a frightened child, or rallied neighbors during a storm. Each time, they noted how people naturally gravitated toward her, trusting her judgment without question. What baffled them most was that Doc never demanded this trust. It came freely, born from genuine care and compassion. As the tests continued, Doc noticed subtle changes in the aliens' behavior. Though they tried to remain stoic, some seemed genuinely curious about her. One younger alien, shorter than the rest, lingered near her after each session, observing quietly. Eventually, it spoke. "Why do you help others?" it asked, its translated voice softer than the others. Doc hesitated, unsure how to explain something so instinctive. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said finally. "We're stronger together. When someone needs help, you step up. You don't need a title to make a difference." The alien tilted its head, as if pondering her words. For the first time since arriving, Doc felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to reach them, to show them that power didn't have to come from fear or force. Doc sat quietly in the alien chamber, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of everything happening around her. The aliens had stopped their tests for now, but she could feel their eyes, or whatever passed for eyes behind those glowing masks, watching her every move. She wasn't sure if they were impressed, confused, or simply bored with her presence. Either way, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let fear take over. If there was any chance of getting through to them, she had to stay calm and think clearly. The younger alien, the one that had asked her why she helped others, seemed different from the rest. It didn't stand as rigidly as the others, and its movements were less mechanical, almost hesitant. Doc decided to test the waters. "Do you have a name?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. The alien paused, its mask tilting slightly. After a moment, it replied, "I am called Vren." "Vren," Doc repeated, testing the unfamiliar syllable. "That's a nice name." Vren didn't respond immediately, but Doc noticed something, a faint flicker in its glowing mask, like a spark of curiosity. Encouraged, she pressed on. "You seem different from the others. Are you curious about humans?" Vren hesitated again, glancing toward the other aliens before answering. "Our ways are precise. Order is strength. Yet," it paused, as if searching for the right words, "your actions do not align with our understanding of power. This troubles us." Doc nodded slowly, sensing an opening. "That's because we don't see power the same way you do. For us, it's not always about control or orders. Sometimes it's about trust, about helping each other without expecting anything in return." Vren tilted its head again, studying her intently. "Helping without reward. How does this benefit your species?" "It keeps us together," Doc explained. "When people know they can count on each other, they're stronger. They work harder, care more, and build better lives. It's not about rewards. It's about connection." For a long moment, Vren said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, it stepped closer, lowering its voice. "We were sent here to gather resources, to take what we need and move on. But I wonder, is this truly the best path?" Doc's heart skipped a beat. Was Vren questioning the mission? She chose her next words carefully. "Taking things by force might give you what you want today, but it won't make friends. And sometimes, having allies is worth more than all the resources in the world." Vren didn't answer, but Doc could tell her words had struck a chord. Over the next few days, the younger alien began visiting her more often, asking questions about Earth, humanity, and how people work together. At first, the conversations were short and guarded, but gradually, Vren opened up. It admitted that many among its kind were growing uneasy about their reliance on strict hierarchies and unquestioned obedience. Some, like Vren, wondered if there might be another way. Meanwhile, back in Maplewood, life was far from normal. The townspeople worried constantly about Doc, unsure if she was safe or even alive. Sarah Miller, a retired teacher with a knack for organizing people, took charge of keeping spirits high. She gathered volunteers to prepare food, watch over the children, and keep everyone informed. Jack Turner, the town mechanic, used his skills to repair old radios and set up a makeshift communication system in case the aliens returned. Despite their efforts, tension lingered in the air. Rumors spread about what the aliens might be doing to Doc, and some feared the worst. But Sarah refused to let despair take hold. "Doc wouldn't give up on us," she reminded everyone during a meeting at the community center. "And we can't give up on her." As the days passed, the bond between Doc and Vren grew stronger. Through fragmented conversations and shared moments of quiet reflection, they began to understand each other in ways neither had expected. Doc realized that beneath their cold, calculating exterior, the aliens weren't so different from humans. They just saw the world through a different lens. And Vren started to see that maybe, just maybe, humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or weapons, but its ability to connect, adapt, and care for one another. It was a fragile alliance, built on trust and curiosity rather than force or fear. But in a universe full of uncertainty, it was enough to plant a seed of hope. For both Doc and the alien standing beside her, Doc spent her days aboard the alien ship learning more about their society. Through Vren, she discovered that the aliens called themselves the Krill, a species deeply rooted in order and hierarchy. Every Krill had a specific role, and stepping outside of it was considered dangerous. Leaders gave commands, followers obeyed without question, and dissent was not tolerated. It was a system designed for efficiency, but Doc couldn't help noticing how rigid and lifeless it felt. "They don't argue." Doc asked Vren one day as they sat in a quiet corner of the ship, "What if someone disagrees with an order?" Vren's mask flickered faintly, a sign Doc had come to recognize as discomfort. "Disagreement is inefficient. Our survival depends on unity. Questioning leads to chaos." "But what if the order is wrong?" Doc pressed gently. "Sometimes, even leaders make mistakes. Isn't it better to have people who can speak up, who care enough to point out when something isn't right?" Vren hesitated, its glowing mask tilting slightly. "This is new thinking. Among my kind, such ideas are forbidden. But," it paused, glancing around cautiously before continuing, "I see value in your words. Perhaps there is strength in questioning, if done with care." Doc smiled faintly, encouraged by Vren's openness. She knew she couldn't change the entire Krill fleet overnight, but planting seeds of doubt in even one mind was progress. Still, time was running out. The longer she stayed aboard the ship, the more restless the townspeople became back home. She needed a plan, a way to turn this fragile connection into something bigger. One evening, while exploring a restricted part of the ship under Vren's guidance, Doc stumbled upon a room filled with holographic maps and data streams. They showed Earth's resources, mines, forests, water sources, all marked for extraction. Worse still, there were plans detailing how the Krill intended to strip Maplewood bare before moving on to larger cities. Her stomach churned at the thought of her peaceful town being torn apart. "Vren," she said quietly, pointing to the maps, "is this what you're here for? To take everything and leave nothing behind?" Vren looked away, its mask dimming slightly. "These are the orders of our commanders. I do not question them." "But you should asterisk," Doc insisted, her voice firm yet kind. "Look at what this will do to us. To Earth. You've seen how humans work together, how we build and create. We're not just resources waiting to be taken. We're people, families, communities." Vren didn't respond immediately, but Doc could see the conflict brewing behind its mask. She decided to push further. What if there was another way? What if instead of taking, you worked asterisk with asterisk us? Shared knowledge, built alliances. Wouldn't that be stronger than conquest? The idea seemed to resonate with Vren, though it remained silent. Over the next few days, Doc noticed subtle changes in its behavior. It began asking more questions during their conversations, probing deeper into human values like cooperation and empathy. Slowly, Doc realized that Vren wasn't just curious. It was starting to doubt the mission itself. Encouraged, Doc devised a risky plan. With Vren's reluctant help, she gained access to key areas of the ship where she could plant small acts of sabotage. Nothing drastic, just enough to slow down the resource-gathering process and buy herself some time. More importantly, she convinced Vren to share fragments of her perspective with other younger Krill. Together, they spread stories of human resilience, creativity, and compassion, highlighting moments when ordinary people achieved extraordinary things without needing orders or titles. At first, the messages were met with skepticism. Older Krykan dismissed them as irrelevant, clinging tightly to tradition. But the younger ones, like Vren, listened. They began questioning the strict hierarchies they'd always taken for granted, wondering if there might be a better way to lead or live. Back on Earth, the townspeople grew increasingly anxious. Sarah Miller organized nightly meetings to discuss strategies, while Jack Turner worked tirelessly to fortify the town against a potential attack. Though they missed Doc dearly, they drew strength from her example, banding together to prepare for whatever came next. Meanwhile, aboard the ship, tension simmered. The Krill commanders grew suspicious of the growing unrest among their crew. When they discovered traces of Doc's interference, fury erupted. Confronting her in the main chamber, the lead commander accused her of trying to undermine their mission. "You will cease this at once." It boomed, its voice echoing menacingly. "Failure to comply will result in destruction." Doc stood her ground, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. "Destroying us won't solve anything," she said firmly. "You'll lose more than you gain. Strength doesn't come from fear. It comes from trust, from working together." Her words hung in the air, sparking murmurs among the gathered Krill. For the first time, cracks appeared in their unity. Some sided with the commanders, loyal to tradition. Others, inspired by Doc and Vren, dared to imagine a different path. As the debate raged on, Doc realized that the battle wasn't lost. It had only just begun. The tension aboard the Krill ship reached a boiling point. The commanders, furious at the growing unrest among their crew, demanded absolute obedience. But for the first time in their history, not everyone complied. Younger Krill, influenced by Doc's words and Vren's quiet defiance, began to question the rigid rules they had always followed. Whispers of doubt spread like wildfire through the ranks, challenging the very foundation of their society. Doc stood in the center of it all, her heart racing, but her expression calm. She knew she was taking a huge risk by speaking out, but she also knew silence wouldn't save anyone. When the lead commander roared at her again, demanding submission, she raised her voice, not in anger, but with steady determination. "I'm not trying to undermine you," she said, meeting the glowing mask of the towering alien. "I'm trying to show you a better way. You think power comes from fear and control, but it doesn't. True strength is about trust, respect, and working together. Look around you. Your own people are starting to see that." Her words struck a nerve. Several Krill shifted uneasily, their masks flickering as if reflecting inner turmoil. Even some of the older ones hesitated, unsure how to respond. The commander slammed a clawed hand against the floor, its mechanical voice booming louder. "Enough. This human speaks lies." But before the commander could continue, Vren stepped forward. Its movements were cautious yet deliberate, drawing every eye in the room. "Commander," it said, its tone respectful but firm, "this human has shown us something we cannot ignore. Her methods may seem strange, but they work. Her people stand united because they trust her, not because they fear her." The commander hissed, its mask flaring brighter. "You dare challenge me. You dare side with an outsider." "I do not seek to challenge," Vren replied, lowering its head slightly. "I seek to understand. If we destroy these humans, we lose the chance to learn from them. Is that truly wise?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd of Krill. Some voiced agreement, while others shouted objections. The chamber erupted into chaos, divided between those clinging to tradition and those inspired by Doc's vision. For the first time, the Krill were no longer a unified force. They were a fractured group grappling with new ideas. Seizing the moment, Doc turned to Vren. "Can you send a message?" she asked quietly. "To all your ships? Let them hear what I've been saying. Let them decide for themselves." Vren hesitated, glancing nervously at the commander. Then, with a deep breath, or whatever passed for breathing among the Krill, it nodded. Using its access to the ship's communication system, Vren broadcast Doc's message across the fleet. Through the translator device, Her voice echoed into the vastness of space, reaching thousands of krill ears. "We're not so different from you," Doc began, her tone warm but unwavering. "We make mistakes, we argue, and sometimes we fail. But when we come together, when we care for each other and work as one, there's nothing we can't overcome. You don't have to conquer us to survive. We can help each other if you're willing to try." As the transmission played, silence fell over the ship. Even the commander stood motionless, its glowing mask dimming slightly. The younger krill exchanged glances, their doubts now shared openly. Back on Earth, the townspeople might never know how close they had come to disaster, or how narrowly it had been averted. Hours later, the krill commanders made their decision. Though reluctant, they agreed to withdraw their forces. They couldn't deny the unrest spreading through their ranks, nor could they ignore the possibility that humanity might hold lessons worth learning. As the massive ships prepared to leave, Vren approached Doc one last time. "Thank you," it said softly, its mask glowing faintly. "You have given us much to think about. Perhaps one day our peoples will meet again, not as enemies, but as equals." Doc smiled, feeling a mix of relief and hope. "I'd like that," she replied. "Take care of yourself, Vren." With that, the krill fleet ascended into the sky, disappearing into the stars. Below, the townspeople of Maplewood cheered as the shadow lifted from their town. Doc returned home to hugs and tears, her simple act of kindness having changed the course of history, for both humans and aliens alike. When Doc stepped off the alien ship and back onto the familiar soil of Maplewood, she was greeted by a wave of cheers and applause. The townspeople had gathered in the square, their faces lighting up with relief and joy as they saw her safe and sound. Sarah Miller rushed forward first, wrapping Doc in a tight hug. "We knew you'd come back," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You always do." Jack Turner stood nearby, holding his cap in his hands. He gave Doc a nod, his usual gruff demeanor softened by gratitude. "You saved us all," he said simply. "Didn't think anyone could talk down an alien fleet, but here we are." Doc smiled weakly, still processing everything that had happened. She didn't feel like a hero, just someone who had done what needed to be done. "It wasn't just me," she replied. "The aliens, they weren't so different from us. They just needed to see things from another perspective." As the crowd dispersed, returning to their homes and businesses, life in Maplewood slowly began to return to normal. But it wasn't quite the same as before. The experience had left its mark on everyone, strengthening bonds and reminding them of the importance of working together. People who had once kept to themselves now made an effort to connect, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. Even small acts of kindness seemed more meaningful, inspired by Doc's example. Over the next few weeks, Doc threw herself into her work at the clinic, finding comfort in the routine of caring for animals. Yet, despite her efforts to stay grounded, she couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had shifted, not just in Maplewood, but out there among the stars. Every night, she looked up at the sky, wondering if the krill were thinking about her too. One evening, as she sat on her porch sipping tea, a faint hum filled the air. At first, she thought it might be her imagination, but then a soft light appeared in the distance, hovering above the trees. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the shape, a small krill vessel, no larger than a car. It descended gently, landing in an open field nearby. Curious and slightly nervous, Doc grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the ship. When the ramp lowered, Vren emerged, its glowing mask dim but recognizable. Seeing it brought a mix of emotions, relief, surprise, and even a hint of happiness. "Vren," Doc said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you again," Vren replied through the translator device. "To deliver a message." It extended a clawed hand, holding out a small, sleek object. "This is for you." Doc took the device cautiously, examining it under the light of her flashlight. It was smooth and metallic, with faint etchings that shimmered like starlight. "What is it?" she asked. "A recording," Vren explained. "Our people have decided to study your ways further. Many believe there is value in what you taught us. This contains our promise to learn, to grow, and perhaps one day to return as friends." Tears welled up in Doc's eyes as she held the device close. "Thank you, Vren. That means more than I can say." Vren tilted its head slightly, its mask glowing faintly. "You changed us, Doc, more than you know. Farewell, for now." With that, the krill turned and re-entered the ship. Moments later, it lifted off silently, disappearing into the night sky. Doc stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where it had vanished. She felt a strange sense of peace, knowing that somewhere out there, seeds of understanding had been planted. Back in town, life continued to flourish. Inspired by Doc's courage, the townspeople worked harder than ever to support one another. Sarah organized weekly gatherings to strengthen community ties, while Jack used his skills to build a new playground for the children. Everyone did their part, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, shaping destinies beyond imagination. And as Doc returned to her quiet life, tending to animals and helping neighbors, she carried with her the knowledge that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its ability to adapt, innovate, and unite. Somewhere among the stars, the krill were learning the same lesson. And perhaps one day, their paths would cross again. Months passed, and life in Maplewood settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. The townspeople carried on with their daily routines, but the memory of the krill lingered like a quiet echo. Doc often found herself thinking about Vren and the others, wondering how far their journey of understanding had taken them. She kept the small metallic device Vren had given her on a shelf in her clinic, its faint shimmer catching the light whenever she walked by. Though she hadn't played the recording yet, she knew it was a promise, a fragile thread connecting two vastly different worlds. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, Doc decided to share the message with the town. She gathered everyone in the park, where they sat on blankets and picnic tables, eager to hear what the aliens had left behind. With a deep breath, Doc pressed the button on the device, and a soft hum filled the air. A voice emerged, not mechanical this time, but warm and thoughtful, speaking directly to them. To the people of Earth, the voice began, "We are the krill. Your actions have taught us much about yourselves and about us. We came seeking resources, believing ourselves superior, but we leave humbled, carrying lessons of trust, compassion, and unity. These are qualities we did not understand before, but now we see their value. We will return to our home to reflect and grow. Perhaps one day, when we are ready, we will meet again, not as conquerors, but as equals." The recording ended with a gentle tone, leaving the crowd silent for a moment. Then, slowly, applause broke out, followed by cheers and laughter. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, while Jack let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "Never thought I'd say this, but those aliens might just turn out all right." Doc smiled, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. The message wasn't just for her, it was for all of them. It reminded them that even in the face of fear and misunderstanding, there was always room for hope, growth, and connection. As winter approached, the townspeople continued to honor the lessons they'd learned. They worked together to prepare for the colder months, sharing supplies and checking in on neighbors who might need help. Doc noticed subtle changes in the way people interacted, more patience, more kindness, more willingness to listen. It was as if the encounter with the krill had awakened something within them, a deeper appreciation for the bonds that held them together. On clear nights, Doc would sit on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, gazing up at the stars. She imagined the krill fleet traveling through the vastness of space, their young ones questioning old ways and dreaming of new possibilities. She wondered if Vren ever looked back toward Earth, remembering the small town where it had first glimpsed another way of living. One evening, as snow began to dust the ground, Doc received an unexpected visitor. A young boy named Ethan, no older than 10, knocked on her door holding a drawing. "I made this for you, Doc," he said shyly, handing it over. The picture showed a spaceship surrounded by stick figures holding hands, with the words "Friends Across the Stars" scrawled across the top. Touched, Doc knelt down to thank him. "This is wonderful, Ethan. Thank you for sharing it with me. I just wanted to remind you that we're all still here," he said earnestly. "And we're all rooting for the aliens, too." His words stayed with her long after he left, reinforcing what she already knew. Humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to care for each other, for the planet, and even for strangers among the stars. Years went by, and though the Krill never returned, their influence remained. Stories of the encounter were passed down, inspiring future generations to think beyond borders and differences. And every so often, someone in Maplewood would look up at the night sky, smile, and whisper a quiet wish. "Safe travels, friend. We'll be here when you're ready." In the end, the story wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about the ripple effects of compassion, the way a single act of kindness could reach across galaxies, planting seeds of change that might one day bloom into something extraordinary. And for Doc, that was enough.